Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to dive into some parcel shipping operations. We're going to learn all about DHL e-commerce's operations and what they do. Aside from the greater DHL, we're going to dive into a little bit of that and differentiate that for you if you're not familiar. And I'm going to be joined by Eric Ricardo. He is a VP of operations over there at DHL e-commerce, and he is going to let us know what their operations look like, how do they function, what kind of automation, equipment are they using, and what they're seeing overall in the parcel industry and parcel market. How do they get those packages to your doorstep? We're going to find out today. So, Eric, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, Kev. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite, and hopefully we can have some fun having this conversation. It's something that's near and dear to my heart.
Yes, definitely. We're going to have some fun for sure. And happy to get you on here to talk about this topic and learn a little bit more about DHL e-commerce. So why don't we kick it off and start it here? Tell us a little bit about DHL e-commerce from your perspective. What is it that you all do, and what's the difference on DHL e-commerce from like the greater DHL itself? Because there's a couple different entities within there, right?
Yeah, let me start on the broader organization, and then I'll zoom
Sure.
in on DHL e-commerce, and then we can be off to the races. So
All right.
DHL, one of the largest, if not the largest, logistics company in the world, and here in the U.S. we have four distinct verticals. One of those is DHL Express. DHL Express offers time-definite international door-to-door shipments. We have DHL Global Forwarding. They specialize in air, ocean, freight. They also have a customs brokerage. Then we have DHL Supply Chain. They are our contract logistics arm. They offer end-to-end supply chain management. And then, of course, there's us, which we'll talk about. That's DHL e-commerce. And here we specialize in business to consumer, U.S. and international delivery. And so what we try to do is we try to connect our online retailers to the end consumer. So we manage everything from picking up at those retailers' warehouses and effectuate the delivery all the way through the final mile to the home or the post office. The way we do the final mile delivery is we partner exclusively with the USPS, and we tap into their vast network, and we leverage them to go to every door every day, 6 days a week throughout the U.S. So it's a great partnership that we've had with them for multiple decades. And that's a little bit about DHL as a whole, and a little more about what we do at DHL e-commerce specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And see you guys all over the place, right? And see the multiple DHL entities all over the place
Yeah.
as well. But looking forward to diving into kind of the operational side of DHL e-commerce specifically. Maybe give us an idea, like, what is a typical weekly volume or daily volume look like network wide for DHL e-commerce? Like, how many packages are you moving?
Yeah. Uh, Not going into extreme specifics, but we move multiple
Sure.
millions of packages per day. When you're
Mm.
talking about the e-commerce sector, of course, just like with anything e-commerce, we have a extreme density of volume on Mondays and Tuesdays. All of the end consumers are ordering product on Saturday, Sunday, and there's usually a heavy volume as those shippers are filling those orders on Monday and Tuesday, and the volume lightens out by the time we get to the end of the week. So it's quite challenging. We may have as much as 100% more volume on a Friday, or excuse me, a Monday, Tuesday in relation to a Thursday, Friday. So it can make for a challenging environment, and let alone what happens in peak season when we see massive spikes in
Mm-hmm.
volume starting
Yeah.
right before uh, Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So, but that's a fun time, and hopefully we have some time to talk about peak season and all that entails.
Yeah, absolutely. And good to understand kind of like how much volume you're moving approximately. And obviously, those fluctuations like you said too.
Yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about like the operations that go into place to support that. So tell us a little bit about kind of the DHL e-commerce network. What does that look like? Is it like sort centers?
yeah,
Where are they?
sure,
And how does that maybe differ from some other networks that may be
sure.
out there?
So the universe of DHL. So in the U.S., we have just under 2 dozen facilities of various sizes, of course. Some
Hmm.
of our, as you can
Sure.
imagine, Los Angeles being next to the Port of LA and Long Beach, one of the biggest facilities. But we have just under 2 dozen facilities. We also have one cross dock location in Canada, And within those facilities, we also have 3 international gateways because in addition to doing domestic shipments, being DHL, we also have an international division. So we have 3 gateway consolidations as well. And we strategically place those next to the heaviest geo zones so we can be as close to the population as possible without having too many facilities. And as I spoke to a bit earlier, based on forecasting, industrial engineering, we're extremely heavily involved in data and industrial engineering, which we can get into deeper. But that really warrants the size of those facilities. Some of our largest facilities, just to get some gravity of what we can do, our largest facility can process up to 70,000 packages an hour. We don't utilize much of that in non-peak because, again, we have to save some capacity for peak season, but we want to make sure that we're always there for our customers, whatever they may throw at us, whatever that day is. And as I alluded to, volumes on Monday and Tuesday are definitely spiked up as they are in relation to a Thursday or a Friday and just a normal week as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and interesting to hear there too. Kind of like the max capacity per hour. You said, I mean, 70,000 packages. That's a lot in 1 hour moving through there, right? So tell us a little bit about, I guess, from the network planning side. You mentioned the data and industrial engineering, right? How do you when you think about like another location or the decision to maybe like expand a location or increase capacity in some way, I mean, how do you plan around that? How do you think about, not only like, what do I need? It's the end of March here as we're recording this, like, what do I need in March? But, then what do I need for that peak season as well? How do you balance that in the planning phase?
We have to take a long-term view because building these new facilities is a multi-year project. So let me give you an example just to quantify that. I always like to speak and then provide an example. So in 2021, we announced a roughly $300 million investment in upgrading our facilities that we thought was going to take about 4 years. So we endeavored on that journey because we see that the e-commerce sector of logistics is the fastest growing sector of logistics.
Yeah.
So our corporate board and bond wanted to support us and invest to make sure that we always have capacity and the right amount of capacity, upgrade our systems, so we could be, as I like to call, a little better, faster, stronger. So we went through that build out, and so at that point in time, we did all of our forecasting and planning to determine what we would need and where we need it. And again, we get the opportunity to make that decision because once we start building and bolting stuff to the ground, we're beholden to that facility for many, many years, if not decades. So we completed that project, the majority of it by 2024, a little bit spilled over into 2025. And I'm happy to say that we delivered on time, under budget. So that was a great success. So now we're positioned really well for volume in the immediate term. But that's the strategic long term, which takes multiple years, in this case, half a decade to build out and plan out. And then the second thing that we do is, as you talked about a little bit, is some of the short-term things. So for us, anything within a year is short-term. So we're already planning for peak season 2026 and what we're going to need for all that. And that, again, that's a whole 7-day conversation. Don't have time to get into all that, but that's where we plan from a short-term perspective. And then as we talked about Monday's volume versus Friday's volume, that's kind of canned. And our industrial engineers have developed some learning tools to really understand the ebbs and the flows so that way we can project what we need in terms of capacity from either air or ground or people or anything in between. So that way we have a very reliable and consistent network. And I really getting feedback from our customers when I go to these business reviews, quarterly business reviews with some of our larger customers, that's the thing that they like about us the most. Whether it's peak season or not peak season, we're extremely reliable and we're extremely consistent. And with that consistency, they can also then plan and execute how they're building out their business as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting to hear that there, and especially, good. I mean, it sounds like you're delivering on time internally on the project, but also delivering on time to the porch of the customer as well, which is fantastic. But I mean, super interesting to hear kind of the 4-year project, and I'm curious, like, over time, as you mentioned, right? I mean, e-commerce is like the largest growing sector in logistics, right? I mean, it seems like, no matter what's going on with the economy, people are still buying stuff online,
Yeah.
and increasingly so, right? It keeps growing year over year. So I mean, as time goes on and as that evolution is kind of taken place and that growth continues to do that, how do you look at addressing that growth from like an equipment perspective? Like you mentioned, you were this project entailed kind of upgrading the facilities a little bit. So what types of things like have you looked at from equipment automation perspective to adjust and kind of I guess adapt to this
Yeah.
continual growth?
Yeah. So the one thing that we have always relied on and we really enjoy is that we have great relationships with
Mhm.
integrators and OEMs. So when we built out the network, we leveraged and try to utilize the most cutting edge automation that's available at the time. That's
Mhm.
also with the caveat that it's somewhat tried and tested and validated, but also it provides the right ROI because there's some automation that hasn't reached maturity level and it's not worth the investment at that point. I'm not saying it wouldn't be in another 3 or 5 or 10 years, but
Sure.
we allow them to go and work out and we give them the rough draft and the idea of what we need and what we're looking for, and we allow them to come to us with a lot of new novel ideas, and that provides at that time the best solution based on technology that's available. Now, just because we finished this project doesn't mean we get the luxury of sitting back and saying, okay, yeah, we've built this steady state now for the next X amount of years. No, now that we've closed this one, we're also projecting forward for the next round of facility updates and automation
Mm.
as we grow in certain areas and there's automation that becomes available. We continue on to develop those relationships with OEMs and integrators. And since we've kind of shut down and closed out this project in 2024 and at the beginning of 2025, there's already been some really new, interesting developments that have come about from an automation perspective that we're very
Yeah.
interested in. And we're going to do some pilots and some beta tests in some various facilities. And that's the important thing about building a facility. You want to build a facility for what you know now, but again, you can't look into a crystal ball and completely predict what the future is going to hold in 5 or 10 years. So you have to try to build a facility that will, one, obviously serve the needs immediately, but then can scale up as volume grows and needs grow. But then also, how can it be somewhat dynamic, and can it be slightly retrofit to incorporate some of the new automation? And
Mm.
that's some of the thing that I am actually most proud of, that we've built some of these facilities that can be a bit dynamic so we can have these integrators and these OEMs bolt some new products on, if I can use that term, bolt products onto our existing warehouses. And so we
Sure.
can test some stuff out. So that's where we are now. And that's what will help us define what we call the next gen facility, incorporating
Mm.
the relevant technology, because technology, as you know, is moving at a very exponential pace, and that's pretty intriguing to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's incredible, like how fastly or how quickly it's evolving, right? Especially in our space, which makes our space
Yeah,
like very exciting, very cool to be in as well. But then also it means like constantly looking at what else could we we utilize, right?
sure.
And how could we bolt on, like you said. So I mean, building that facility, like you said, I think is really smart to have that approach to, okay, as things develop, as new technologies come out, especially in the time that we're in right now, as these iterations keep growing and growing so rapidly. It's great to have that flexibility to do that. I'm curious what your take is on, because there's a lot of discussion, I think, in the industry right now as it pertains to this in terms of like, the fixed versus flexible automation solutions, right? And,
Hmm.
and you mentioned kind of the bolt on there, or the bolt down. I think you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier too as well, which would be more of that fixed automation. So what's your view on that, and how do you approach like, all right, we're gonna get something that attaches to the ground versus like, well, let's look at something that's a little more flexible, isn't as I guess permanent in a sense.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. And so in our space, which is not the 3PL world, we're more
Hmm.
of fixed, focused on consistency, high speed sortation, velocity. So where some 3PLs may say, "Oh, I have 2 million square foot campus," as I talked about and I referenced, we hang our hat
Yeah,
on how many packages we can sort per hour, and I said we can go 70,000 pieces per hour. But when I
sure.
say bolt on, that comes in a few different formats. So if an
Okay.
integrator has a solution for us, and we can do the due diligence, and there's an ROI to support a capex purchase, yeah, we may do that. These days, there's a lot of integrators and OEMs that are offering up robot as a service, so we don't have to have that capex outlay, and it's on a per click or per usage basis. So there's a lot of flexibility. And when we talk about testing new technology, sometimes we'll say, yeah, we'll test it in a robot as a service perspective, and if it works itself out, then contractually we say we have the opportunity to buy it and switch it over to a capex purchase at that point in time. But again, that's about flexibility, and that's probably not a lot something that was really readily available over the last 10 years. Robot as a service has kind of popped up and made a difference over, I don't know, last 5 or 6 or 7 years, and I kind of see that as the way of the future, especially when you're talking about not only integrators but OEMs, and they're coming directly to folks like us that say, hey, we have a what we think is a cool new innovative product. I know from a capex perspective, you might not uh, see this as an opportunity yet, but how about robot as a service? And then we'll have some honest conversation and say, it costs us X amount per piece to do this manually. What can you offer as robot as a service? And then we also offer our facility and our packages as a test bed for them. So they will be in there tinkering, having their techs and their engineers, software engineers, constantly refining and refining and refining. And if they can get to an agreed upon SLA, that'll trigger potentially a capex. So a lot of opportunities to test a lot of things at this day and age that I really enjoy.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely, and it's super exciting, as I said earlier. This kind of day and age that we're in, and
Yep.
seeing some of the technology that is even possible at this point. So, let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned kind of like, the way 3PL looks at something versus the way like you look at something for one of your facilities. I mean, talk to us about some of kind of the operational differences within the four walls that like you would look at versus I guess the DHL
hmm
supply chain side, the 3PL side would look at. How does that kind of differ a little bit from
Yeah.
an infrastructure perspective?
Yeah. So for us, both on both sides of that, 3PL or us, we look at obviously utilization. That's critically
Mm,
important. Um, but then for us, we also look at scalability. So we can always we want to stay in a facility for as long as we possibly can. Ideally, we'd love to buy a piece of dirt, build
mm,
what we need, leave the other unincorporated dirt as we need it, we scale on. But one of the things that's critically important, one of the KPIs that's critically important to us is throughput per square foot. As
mm.
I now referenced, I think throughput 2 or 3 times in this short 20-minute conversation. That's
Sure. Yeah.
critically important to us. How can we get as much throughput out of these facilities as we possibly can? And if you ever see, say, a DHL e-commerce facility, or maybe some of our competitors, it's usually a small facility surrounded by a relatively large, inexpensive yard. Because
Mm,
yard space is, we kind of call it unlimited, but that facility is extremely expensive. So how can we squeeze as much out of that facility as we possibly can? And that's a very delicate balance, because you have to feed the machine as quickly as possible, but then you also have to be able to take that volume out, because again, a 3PL, they're okay to store. That's their model. They're going to store and pick and pack, and that's how they're
mm,
generating revenue. We want to get it in. We want to get it out as quickly as possible. We don't store things. We look at dwell time in terms of hours and minutes, as opposed to them cycles by month. So it's a very fast-paced, robust operation. People have walked into our facilities before and said, "Wow, I feel like this is just it's going so fast. It's absolute chaos." And the way we call
yeah.
it is it's an orchestrated symphony with all these miles of conveyance and all these things happening. So again, slightly different world. Both are very challenging, dynamic, robust. But yeah, we just have a slightly different world in terms of how packages are measured in our facility in terms of minutes, as opposed
Mm.
to months or cycle times, which could be as much as a quarter.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, very interesting there. And I think, I mean, I think that summed up perfectly when you said that, like, your goal is like, all right, how quickly can I get this package in and get it
Yep,
out of the building, right? Versus the 3PL side is like, okay, well, part of our business is storage, right? So
exactly.
like we can store and then we pick pack and do those types of things. So I'm curious, like, I don't know if you can share like this metric maybe, but I mean, how, like, what is the goal? Like how quickly, is a sortation facility looking to get a package through the building in and out?
Yeah. So the challenge that I've given our industrial engineers and the entire ops team is to have nothing sitting in a facility for more than an hour. Again, that's an average of
Wow.
all.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
We're also going through some pilots and some beta tests to, obviously, as I say, we're going through pilots and beta tests. We're not quite there yet, but I think it's achievable. The data, the planning shows that it's achievable, so that's what we're going to go for. And again, if we can make that a reality, we can get more packages through an existing facility. Fixed cost drops, and again, fixed cost drop. That's obviously good for us, good for
Mhm.
our customers, so we can pass some of that savings back on to them, and it again obviously makes us much more competitive in this world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Interesting. So I'm curious now. I mean, amongst the automation and figuring out how to get the data together and all these things, like obviously you still have a human component to
Hmm.
this as well, right? So with all these advancements in technology that we've talked about, and the kind of rapid iterations of everything that's happening, how do you approach like the balance between the automation side of the operations and then the human element side of the operations?
Yeah,
How do you find the right balance, and how are you approaching that, I guess, into the future as well as automation becomes more and more prevalent?
sure. It's a good question. The the nice talk track is how can we automate and automate and automate and remove the human element? Well, I
Mm,
understand that, but there's always going to be a human element to in these warehouses. And when it comes down to the planning phase, I've already spoken on a couple of times. We're very data driven. We're already planning for peak season. We plan multiple years in advance to strategically place all these facilities, and we need people to do that. So as I've said before, I like to make a statement and then give you an example. So in this
mm.
case, we've actually partnered up with Georgia Tech, and we are now one of their gold sponsors.
Okay.
Again, we are, and I am very big on the data, and the data kind of usually tells the story. And so, Georgia Tech being one of the premier, if not the premier, industrial engineering schools in the country, we embarked on a journey, and now we're a gold sponsor of theirs. And so, we want to go and hire and source and select the absolute very best. And we feel that Georgia Tech is one of the schools that can do that. So now we have a direct pipeline with them. Again, kind of bring it all together, we see that we're going to continue to grow. We have a lot of ambitious plans for growth. We need to project out short term, long term, and we need big, beautiful brains in order to make that a
Mm,
reality. So we will put our money where our mouth is and go and invest in these sponsorships and get what we believe to be the very best. And what I will say is that the people that have already come fresh out of college to us, I'm extremely happy with
mm.
their learning, what they bring to the table, how quickly they can immerse themselves in the DHL culture and kind of get on their toes to help us be as offensive minded as possible by giving us some sound data. So that's just an example of how we go, and we will source and select what we consider to be the absolute best. And again, I'm super pleased with what I've seen so far with that relationship.
Yeah, yeah, that's great to hear, definitely, and certainly like investing in the future, especially for supply chain, I think is so important because I think I mean, maybe now more, right? Since the pandemic, especially supply chain is a little more well known
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
general public, but still, I think like the younger generations, they don't necessarily even get exposed or maybe learn about supply chain until they get to college, right? I think that should be happening like earlier in life a little bit.
Hmm.
So great to hear that you're doing that. So what about like in the centers themselves? Like how are you viewing the human element? I guess working in collaboration
Yeah.
with the automation on
Hmm.
the sortation
Yeah.
side and moving those packages through.
Yeah. Over the last, same time, roughly 5 years, we've really spent a lot of time and energy, capital to develop
Hmm.
what I consider to be a very robust training team as well. Um, in the past, maybe our training to bring on, say, an hourly worker wasn't the best. We saw that need. Our turnover was too high, and we just felt that the way we're bringing these people in, training them, getting ready to hit the floor, so to speak, wasn't adequate. So we spent a lot of time, energy, resources, and money to develop what we call a new hire orientation program. That slowly builds these people up to speed. We talk about what to expect, give them real world examples, put them in a classroom environment for multiple days so that way they can build a relationship, at least with the peers that are going to be on the floor. They're introduced to a trainer, supervisor. And again, we all understand that when you start a new company, it's like being in high school and you're the new kid. So we've seen
Mm,
that if we can
yeah.
get somebody to be there for a week, they're going to stay for a month. If they're going to stay for a month, they're going to stay for 6 months. And that's our goal.
Mm,
Turnover is extremely expensive. We know what our volume is. We know what our staffing requirements are. And we also know, as kind of I've alluded to before, irrespective of the automation that you have, you're always going to be as good as the people that are bolting on and working with that automation. And so that's critically important. So yeah, we kind of invest when we see the need. And again, we believe that we've now created a really robust training and onboarding program. And quite honestly, the numbers speak for themselves in terms of reducing
Mm.
turnover from where it was, a handful of years ago to where it is now. So I was just talking to some of a larger group internally, stating that how much of a proponent I am in our new hire orientation program.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great to hear. And obviously, I mean, I think proven case there. Like, I mean, having a robust onboarding program and plan, like, can really make a difference. And I think, you're showing the proof there to see that. So I'm curious, as we look towards the future, I know we talked a lot about kind of the evolution of the technology here. I mean, your typical kind of entry level hourly worker in a warehouse operations setting is going to be like a material handler, right? But I think I'm curious from your perspective, and I've asked a few of my guests this as well. I'm very interested to hear the answers. But if we look, 5 years, 10 years down the line, what do you think that entry level position evolves to amongst all of this automation and robotics and everything that's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in the e-commerce sector,
Mm-hmm.
because there's such a massive movement from traditional brick and mortar to e-commerce, even though we're automating facilities, which then removes some need for human capital, I think it's an interesting balance. And I'm really curious to see just how much of a drop in percentage of human capital is needed. Because again, there's some functions over the next 5 years that are still just not going to be automated. The technology is not going to be there. So as there's more packages flowing through, whether it's a 3PL or a true hub model like ours, just more volume requires more people. So I think there might be just a consistency in the amount of raw people. Now, the functions that they do, I think, are going to change, and we've seen that. So the one place where I see quite a bit of automation coming in, which is really intriguing, is that there's a lot of OEMs developing unload mechanisms that can handle unloading loose loaded trailers. So today, if you look at us or any of our competitors, there's a lot of human capital that is used to unload trucks. That's going to go away. However, then right on the other side, if you have more trailers being loaded going out the door, you just move those people from the front side of the building to the back side, because I don't see automation being able to loose load trailers in the next 5 years for a multitude of package size and physical characteristics. I don't see anybody working on that and cracking that code yet. So I think the amount of people will stay to a certain degree. They're just going to do different functions within the warehouse. Things like forklift drivers, I think that might be something that an AMR to a large extent is already replacing, as I already talked about the unload. But again, with just more volume going in, I think I'm not going to see in my career what we call a dark facility where you just don't need anybody, maybe later on. But even with that, now you have all these machines and robotic arms and AMRs, AGVs, picking. Somebody's going to have to maintain all that stuff. So again, instead of driving the forklift, now maybe somebody's maintaining that forklift, which would obviously command a much higher wage as well.
Yeah, interesting perspective, and yeah, I think some of the the loading unloading stuff that's coming out is pretty fascinating, and I think exciting too. I mean, some of that floor loaded stuff is like probably the worst, one of the worst jobs out there. I mean, it's super heavy lifting, right? Taxing on the back and everything.
That's how I started many years ago at one of.
Oh yeah.
Okay. 17, fresh out of high school, and they said, "Here, go unload that trailer, and if you can do that for a week, well, I guess we'll keep you." So yeah, I know firsthand how challenging that can be.
Yes, definitely, and very interesting to hear the perspective on kind of the long term, and obviously a nice focus there on kind of the upskilling, right, and being able to now evolve people into doing the maintenance and these higher wage kind of jobs like you talked about there. So I'm curious too. I mean, as we look at your operations, right, and obviously you're talking about the data and the industrial engineering. How do we increase your favorite word of this conversation, the throughput, right,
Sure.
of
Yeah.
the building, right, and make that better. We have a decent number of 3PLs that listen to this podcast, and I'm
Mhm.
sure some of them are customers, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So from the customer perspective, like how can they set themselves up to be more successful getting their packages through your buildings faster? Like what would you advise them to do when they're sending them your way?
Well, I think that goes into the implementation of specific customers. And so,
Mm,
not to be too salesy here, but just bear with me for a minute.
sure, no
As a
problem.
new customer comes on, or even an existing customer, we have an implementation group, CRM group, customer service group, and as I said, I go and visit customers that have started, or large customers that want to
Mm,
start. It's about understanding what their facilities are capable of, and understanding what our facilities are capable of, and then ultimately understanding what their consumer wants. So it really comes
mm,
down to an issue of speed, cost, reliability. So if we can integrate into their supply chain, or they can integrate to ours based on their automation. I've already talked about our reliability is great, second to none, and so that breeds consistency. And then it
mm,
comes down to now speed and cost. So we've got a few different services that have different speeds. So again, it really comes down to what those end consumers really want and expect. It's really a different world these days. When some people first started with 2-day service, everybody kind
yeah.
of clamored to that. Now there's a bit of a morph to where, well, I can wait a little longer for a reduced cost. So really, again, setting expectations with the end consumer, and then speaking with those shippers that want to give us packages is about understanding what they can do, we can do, and we can come to a great hybrid solution, maybe some off the rack solutions. But that's where the conversations really need to start, and so that way we can engineer what's best for everybody. And then with that, we have our specified SLAs, and everybody seems to be quite happy, and it works really well for everybody with our different suite of services.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really, great to hear and interesting to hear about how you can kind of, I guess, morph and, make sure that things fit into what the customer wants at the end of the
Yeah,
day and be able to assess that, right? Because to your point, right, like, not everything needs to be delivered in within 2 days,
yeah,
right? And I think consumers have backed off of that a little bit, right? Especially since, the pandemic and they're
absolutely.
not home all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like, and there's a realization of that. So I think that's really interesting how you do that in a kind of a collaborative effort there. So now as we look towards kind of the future, right? Specifically on the parcel side of things, what do you think that's going to kind of evolve and look like a couple years down the road?
I think we've seen already that there's in the space that we play in, there's different competition now, which is
Mm,
which is fine. There's always been competition, and with this
yeah.
new, what I'll call new breed of competition, that keeps us all on our toes. That keeps us iterating and moving and driving forward. In the end, it's just going to be better overall options for the end consumer. The adoption of e-commerce shipping and those e-commerce platforms, it's not going away. As I
Mm,
talked about, e-commerce is the fastest growing sector. I do think that in the competition space, there's a few too many players. I think that as we look forward in 2026 and definitely moving forward, we're going to see some people getting acquired, some mergers, some people just stepping
mm,
out of the space because, as you know, logistics can be a brutal industry, and only the
yeah.
strongest survive. But again, I think with that competition is going to breed new opportunities for automation. So our integrators are working quite hard, OEMs are working quite hard. Um, but again, overall, with the packages and the growth, I think there's going to be a bit of a consolidation in how many players are in the market. But e-commerce is here to stay, and I'm quite happy to
Mm,
be part of this sector of logistics. And I think that we've done quite well with competitors of the past. We need to stay abreast of what the market is holding from competitors now and in the future, and so we can offer the right solutions. So that way we can be the provider of choice for a multitude of customers. And I think we're positioning ourselves quite well with what we've done in the past for that $300 million upgrade to our network, some more money that we're
mm.
going to be asking for to add on some more automation. So I think we're positioning ourselves quite well for what the short term and the long term future have to hold.
All right, fantastic, and definitely looking forward to seeing what that evolution ends up being, and how the sector continues to grow and expand. And very interesting to dive into and learn about just what goes into making these packages move and at that high throughput, as you
Yep.
mentioned as well. So really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us today and telling us all about DHL e-commerce's network and the operations and what goes into getting these packages on our front porch, right? A very important thing
Yep.
for our everyday lives, of course. So Eric, what's the best way to learn more information about DHL e-commerce or get in touch?
Yeah, best way, just reach us online at dhl.com. We'd love to hear from you. Love to see what we can do about helping anybody out with any shipping needs that they may have now or in the future.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here for people that want to learn more. So, Eric, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Yep, thanks. It's been fun. I enjoyed the conversation.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.